we are looking forward to how God is going to work in and through us as we continue to move forward until everyone hears about our Lord Jesus Christ, until we have movements everywhere and everyone knows someone who truly follows Jesus. As we are working on this as a movement, we have had to look at how we can reorganize in order to be more effective. A lot of work has gone on. We have involved different segments of the organization. We've come up with a lot of great ideas, and we are finally settling on an approach to leadership, a way to relate as leaders, and we are looking at something that is different from what it used to be in the past. And yet at the same time, we realize that it's not all about structure. It's not all about smart organizational ideas and principles. It really comes down to who the leaders are, who the staff are. It comes down to the mind of the leader. And so when we are looking at the situation as it is now, and the leadership that we need to be able to move forward, we have to ask ourselves, what mindsets do we need in the leaders who will take us forward? What mindsets are prevalent now? So therefore, what needs to change? We also need to look at what new leadership behaviors do we need? What are the current leadership behaviors? So what changes are needed? And these will then inform trainings and other equipping resources that we need to be able to make those changes possible. I like to speak to the subject of the mindset shifts that we are looking at. And I'm not speaking to this in the sense that we don't have these mindsets and we therefore need to have them now, but I want to speak in terms of less of and more of, right? So from to, but it's within the context of less of and more of. And the first one I will speak to is less of a fear culture and more of a freedom culture. What do I mean by that? Well, it is possible to lead with fear intentionally or unintentionally. When leaders are insecure, one instrument they have in order to protect their turf is that of fear. And you create an environment of fear when you are working a lot with policies and implications of taking wrong actions. You are focusing a lot on what goes wrong and what punishments will go with what goes wrong, instead of looking at the positives and how to encourage people to engage more with the positives. The root of that is insecurity in the lives of the leaders. But you can also have fear just from the style of leadership. When the leader is leading more with control instruments instead of empowering instruments, and is looking more at restrictions instead of encouragement to take risks. People are more concerned about the boundaries and the violation of the boundaries and the implications than they are about the opportunities and how to seize them and the freedom to go after the opportunities even if you make mistakes. So it's important that we have less of a fear culture and more of a freedom culture. We can also talk about another mindset shift, that is the mindset of independent thinking to the mindset of interdependent thinking. And so we look at ourselves as individuals, we look at ourselves as national ministries, we look at ourselves as different units of the organization. There is the possibility to be more independent in our thinking. Our national ministries are autonomous, they are incorporated legally, they are independent entities, if you like. But to be part of the global movement, there is a choice made to be interdependent, so that we come under one global leadership and we are working towards a common vision. And we are effective as a collective whole when we pursue interdependence as against independence. And so that shift is very, very important, because my role and my areas of responsibility are a part of a whole. And so I am not given a responsibility so that I will chase after it, ignoring all others. We are not in competition. I will fulfill my part of our part, being mindful of others who are involved. We can also talk about having less of empowering by bringing others down to empowering by lifting everyone up. What do I mean by that? There are times that we look at empowerment as requiring winners and losers. In other words, if I'm going to empower those who are at the national level, then I need to disempower those who are at the global level, or vice versa. If I'm going to empower those who are in geography, then I need to disempower those who are in strategy. That kind of thinking is scarcity mindset. When we want to look at the subject of empowerment, we should look at empowerment with an abundance mindset. And that means all of us can win at the same time. And so we can lift up geography and lift up strategy and lift up operations. We can lift up national, we can lift up local and lift up global, all at the same time. And that is the kind of mindset we need as we move forward. We are interdependent, we are working together, and we are not in competition. Then we need to have less of leading with control and more of leading with empowerment, but leading with a mindset that less is more. What do I mean by less is more? Basically, we are talking about leadership that focuses on a few cardinal principles and allows for flexibility in strategies and methods. So when we come to the local level, we want to clarify some essential characteristics of movements, but we don't want to give the local level all the programs they need, all the materials they need, so that they are always bombarded with ideas and programs to the extent that they cannot be creative. We think that what is most important for us is to have the kind of environment that encourages all leaders to first of all look to God and ask the Lord, what do you want to do in our lives? What do you want to do in our situation? When the Holy Spirit is the leader in our movement thinking and strategizing, then we have an empowered field. And that can only happen when we work with the slogan, less is more. Less control is more of victory. That's really what we are looking at. And we also can look at less of unity through uniformity and more of unity through diversity. When we look at unity through uniformity, it means that we feel secure as an organization when everybody's using the same material, using the same logo, using the same program. And that uniformity means that we are eliminating the possibilities of failure or low standards by making everyone do the same things. Well, there is an advantage to that, but there are many disadvantages at the same time. When you are promoting uniformity, you are not creating room for relevance to the various diverse contexts within which we are operating. Our world has become a very complex world. It's very, very fast. It's very, very diverse, and it's dynamic. And we need leaders who are agile and are able to adapt very, very quickly to the different situations and develop the relevant resources to respond to the ever-changing needs. And so the unity is going to come from common principles that we embrace, common criteria that we embrace, with flexibility for methodology and strategies. So unity in diversity is what we want more of, and less of unity through uniformity. And we also can look at less of I am for geography, I am for strategy, I am for operations, and more of I am for geography, strategy, operations. Because geography, strategy, operations are different areas of leadership that are essential for us to be able to accomplish our mission. We cannot do what God has asked us to do with geography alone. We cannot do what God has asked us to do with strategy alone. We cannot do what God has asked us to do with operations alone. It is a completely irrelevant question to ask which is more important, geography, strategy, or operations, because they are all important, just like the human body. You can say the head is important, you can say it's the most important, but have you seen the head walking? Have you seen the head carrying things? So we need to embrace the idea that we need one another, and we are all of importance, and we win when we are all operating together. So the competition between strategy, operations, and geography must give way to cooperation among strategy, geography, and operations. That's just looking at some of the mindset shifts in the context of less of and more of. But let's now come to the kinds of leadership behaviors that it will take for us to be able to lead in this new era in ways that will increase our level of effectiveness and fruitfulness. The first leadership behavior I like to look at is that of leading from a place of restedness. I like to say that the world needs more rested leaders. A leader who is at rest is a leader who has placed his or her confidence fully in God, has laid all the concerns in his or her life at the foot of the cross, and is freed and liberated, for that matter, to chase after God's dreams and to pursue things that only God can bring about. When you know that God is the one who is at work and you are only an instrument, you can be at rest. On the other hand, you can see yourself as the one who is going to make things happen for God. Well, that's not the plan. God's plan is for you to be an instrument. In actual fact, the emptier you are of yourself, the better a vessel you are in the hands of God. And so, if the Lord, who has everything in the world under perfect control, including the organization and the people in the organization, is the one that you are trusting, then you can be at rest. And a rested leader is really a valuable leader for many reasons. The first thing is that a rested leader can hear from God. The second thing is that a rested leader is approachable. Others come to you and they find it inspiring. Now, on the other hand, if you are irritated and you are too busy and your whole private life is loud and crowded, that when people come to you, they can feel the wall because they know that there isn't margin in your life to create enough space for them. You need to be a rested leader. A third reason why you need to be a rested leader is that it's essential for your health. It's essential for longevity in service. It's essential for effectiveness in service. So lead from a place of restedness. That's what we are looking at. Then we also need leaders who are leading with vision, values, and principles. When you lead with vision, values, and principles, you create a lot of space for people to embrace the vision, to embrace the values, to embrace the principles, and then ask the question, how will this work? Or how will things work in our context? And when people can ask that question genuinely, with the awareness that they had the flexibility to make things work in their context, then you know that you are leading with principles, values, and vision. On the other hand, when people are forcing a particular program or strategy into their situation, then you know you are leading with programs because they are forcing to make it work. And it may not work very well. But if that's all they have to do, because that's what the organization is pushing, then they are going to do it anyway. But the end result is that they are not going to see a lot of effectiveness. But the more serious issue here is that when you are leading that way, you are denying people the chance to be creative. And when you are denying people the chance to be creative, you are actually denying them the opportunity to be human. Because God, who created the world, created humans with a capacity for creativity. And so human beings in organizations that limit their ability to be creative are being dehumanized. And so leading with vision, values, and principles is really, really important. We also want leaders who have the courage to make the tough calls, to make the tough decisions. It is good to be nice, but as I say to leaders when we're having these kinds of conversations, nice leaders don't change the world. Tough leaders do. You can be tough and loving at the same time. You can be strong and soft at the same time. And that is what we are looking at, where there are some very bold decisions that need to be made. There are some very courageous steps that need to be taken, seeking wisdom from God, encouragement from God, and creativity from God to take those steps, to make those decisions. That's what we need as we are going into this new era. And we have to look at, for instance, the areas where we have not been, or the areas where we haven't seen much fruit, or the areas where the gospel has not really reached. And we have many of those areas. And we know that 12 countries have 75% of the population of the world that is least reached with the good news of Christ. It's going to take courageous leaders to mind the missional gap and do something about it. We can't spend the next 3, 5, 10 years doing business as we used to do, to work in communities where we have been, and to not intentionally prioritize those areas where we need to be. The time has come for bold, courageous leadership. Then, within that context, we can also look at the resolution of conflicts. A lot of times, we see issues that need attention. They need to be resolved. They need to be talked through. But we shy away from having the crucial conversations. I hate to say it, but I have to say it, that there are situations where I feel non-Christians in secular environments are more honest than Christians. And I have the privilege of working with non-Christian groups, running leadership seminars and consulting and working with government leaders, corporate leaders, etc. And in a non-Christian secular environment, when you are being fired, somebody will tell you, you have failed, we gave you more opportunities, you didn't make the most of the opportunities, you are fired, but we'll give you something to make your transition affordable. In a Christian environment, you will be told, or you may be told, you didn't do too badly, you've done good job in a general sense, but we feel it's time for you to move on, for someone else to move in. And we want you to move into this new area of work. And you say, well, if I've done a good job and I'm enjoying doing it, why can't I stay? And you will be told, no, you don't. You won't stay, but you've done a good job. In other words, we are speaking Christianese to one another. And Christianese is not necessarily Christ-like. We are just being nice to one another. And in that context, a culture is built where we don't level up. We don't have the crucial conversations that are needed to resolve issues, to move barriers, so that we can freely focus on being spirit-filled and going for the mission. In this new era, we are going to have those crucial conversations, not because we want to be confrontational, but we want to be transparent, vulnerable, honest, loving, and committed together to prioritizing our calling to be like Jesus and to proclaim Jesus to the world. We also need leaders who are operating with transparency and authenticity. You know, it used to be that when we were going to make decisions and communicate decisions, especially decisions about leadership, we had a nice way of presenting this. We will say, we have prayed, we have talked with people, and the Lord has confirmed to us this person is the right person for the job. There was no process. In actual fact, there was no serious engagement of others. And people wonder how the decision came about, what factors were looked at. But then they cannot do anything about the decision because the name of God has been thrown in there, that God has convinced us or spoken to us or confirmed to us that this is the right decision. Well, that is not exactly the right way to lead as we are looking at the kind of leadership we need in this era. We want processes that are transparent. We want processes that engage all stakeholders. But we also want processes that are non-manipulative, non-coercive, and characterized by integrity. What do I mean by that? You can actually have processes that are engineered toward a desired end which is already known. And the process is used to, as it were, manipulate people to come to the desired end, which is what the leaders want to arrive at. When you have such a manipulative process, it really accentuates lack of integrity. And it destroys trust. And it demoralizes people. So having transparent processes is great, but they must be authentic, they must be non-manipulative, non-coercive, and they must be characterized by integrity, They must be engaging all stakeholders, and the processes should be used as instruments to help. The most important thing is to know the right decision. But coming to this era of leading with transparency and vulnerability is very, very important for us as we are chasing what the Lord has for us in the years that are ahead. Now, we also need to look at the speed at which we make decisions, the speed at which we engage to look at very crucial issues. And I like to say here that COVID-19, for all its ills and pains and sufferings, has opened our minds to new ways of relating, new ways of doing business that are actually revolutionary. For instance, we used to meet with the area team leaders, we used to meet 2 to 3 times a year, 2 times a year for sure, face to face, and we try to squeeze as much of our business into those 2 meetings as possible. You're looking at 10 days a year of face-to-face, roughly. Now, COVID era, we are meeting every other week. And every other week, we are engaging and looking at issues, adjusting and thinking and making decisions. That's incredible. Compare 2 meetings a year to meeting every other week. And that's like 20 plus meetings within the year. That kind of acceleration must not leave us post-COVID-19. I believe that the way the world is moving, things are very dynamic, very complex, and we have to be leaders who are agile, leaders who are able to make the most of opportunities within the shortest possible time, leaders who are able to retool, repurpose very quickly because our mission is clear, our vision is clear, and we know the principles with which we should be working. And increasing the speed is going to be a very important thing for us. Let's look at one area of application. As we've looked at reorganizing, we all have been thinking, okay, when we reorganize, we are stuck with a structure for the next 5 years or for the next 10 years. But Steve Sellers, as our president, has clarified that no, that's not the case. The structure is going to remain fluid in some areas, and we are going to be adjusting as we need to and as we move forward. And so we are into an era of dynamism, an era of flexibility, an era of adaptability, with only one goal: increasing effectiveness in building movements of multiplying disciples who will take the good news of Christ to everyone on planet Earth and accelerate our common dream and calling, the fulfillment of the Great Commission.